Welcome to our space where talking about the inspiring things with inspiring people is what inspires us. Waiting for you here are the infinite possibilities that creation, collaboration, and connection have to offer. A universe where we see everything through rose-tinted spectacles that help us to keep our faith in the power of imagination alive and well. And now, let's talk. Welcome to Metralla Rosa. Today we are going to be enjoying the company of a fascinating artist and an outstanding photographer with at least 20 years of experience. His name is Frederic Aranda, and he was born in Switzerland, but he lives in the UK since he decided to do a degree in Japanese in Oxford. He's also a photographer that specializes in portrait and group portrait, and we want to talk with him about the fabulous art of photography, an art that he started exploring at a very young age, and that we believe he's still very deeply in love with. Thank you so much for being here with us. It's been amazing because I have seen videos and interviews he has done like at least for 2 days non-stop. So I feel like you are my friend. I love you already. So that perfect. And I would like to start for the basics. I know that the first moment that you realized that you wanted to work with people and take photos was when you took photos of your mom.
That's right.
And you as a family were going through a difficult period because your parents were getting divorced. I myself had a divorce after 18 years of marriage, and I can relate to what you were telling when you talk about that, but also I would like to know if somehow you made an unconscious connection between make people feel beautiful or feel appreciated and some sort of therapeutic work somehow. Do you relate to your work as a form of therapy?
Wow, that's such a great question.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, I think ideally, in an ideal scenario, yes, you should be able to help people by making them feel good about themselves. You know, some photographers don't care about that approach, but that's the approach I've had from the start. So ideally, yes. In some cases, when you do shoots and you're commissioned by a magazine, you don't have time to get to know the person. You don't have much time on the shoot. So that doesn't necessarily happen every time. You know, sometimes you go into situations with politicians where you've only got a few minutes, and the idea is not necessarily to make them look more beautiful than they are, because I think when it's politicians, you need to show them as they really are.
Mm-hmm.
But with people who you're interested in or who you like, you know, then of course, if you can help them, then that's ideal. And photography has this power for sure. That I discovered from the very start, as you say, photographing my mother when she was going through a divorce. And it was a good thing that she was divorcing, you know, but as you know,
still is a grief. It's a very tough moment of your life, a changing moment also.
Yeah, it's a trauma.
Yeah.
And so you've got to try and deal with it the best way you can. And I was 20 at the time when it happened. That was 20 years ago. And I love my mother so much.
You are only 40? Oh, that's good. You are a baby. I'm envy.
Well, you look younger.
48.
No way. Okay.
Okay. Well, I use products to cover the whites.
Well, you're doing something great.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
But yeah, 20 years ago, I saw my mom going through a very difficult time. So I just wanted to distract her. And I said, look, let's just have fun today. Why don't you get some of those beautiful clothes out from the closet and let's lay them all out and see, you know, what we should try, and do your makeup, do your hair, and do something to make yourself feel good. You know, don't just sit there, and let's do something fun, you know. And I realized that actually it works, you know.
She was actually feeling somehow coming to terms with things that we probably don't even understand clearly, but being photographed can be a ritual, can be as important as rituals of passage in life, like the moment you had your baptism, whatever it's whatever the name exactly, or the moment you get married, or the moment you, I don't know, depending of the religion and also cultural reasons. All these things are really important because are moment that allows you to be conscious of what is actually happening and celebrate these things. So somehow having your photo taken can have that kind of power.
And also, I think when you're suffering in particular, I don't know about you, but I know for myself, when I suffer, I feel like I'm in the moment and I'm very much alive at that moment. There is something about suffering that actually makes it bearable when you know, when you look at it with perspective from the outside, and you realize, I'm going through this tough time right now. This is part of the human condition. This is part of being alive. Suffering is part of that.
There's a huge beauty in sadness that you will never really catch in other moments. And I have seen it even through selfies that you take to yourself. The moments that you are going through processes that are more tough, there's something in those eyes, in that expression, in whatever it is, that even if you are trying to look good and to be fine, you can see the beauty of sadness. And now that we are talking about that, I kind of understand why you are so fascinated about Japanese culture, because they are huge at understanding these kind of things. They actually have all these things that they, when something broke, instead of throwing it away, they make it more special, putting the parts together. And but when did that fascination about Japan started? Can you recognize the moment you said, oh my God, I want to learn about this culture?
Oh yeah, it was very early on in primary school, because many of my friends were Japanese. I went to an international school in Geneva, so there were people from all over the world. And I became very close with some of the Japanese kids. And I would go to their house afterwards, and we would play Nintendo. We would look at anime. I would eat Japanese food that their parents prepared.
So the proper way.
Yeah. I was immersed in Japanese culture from a very early age that way, you know, and I would hear them speaking Japanese. They would teach me some words. And I also grew up watching French television, which at the time broadcast a lot of Japanese anime as well, you know. So from a very early age, France and Japan have a very special bond. And in Switzerland, in Geneva, our main channels are French channels. So I grew up watching, influenced by that as well. So, and then I went to Japan for the first time when I was 17, before I applied to university, because I wanted to see if I was going to love it as much as I thought. And it was even better than I imagined. I fell in love with it. I went by myself for 2 weeks and traveled around, not speaking a word. And then I was even more determined to learn Japanese then, because I thought, what could this be if I could actually communicate with people?
And there's in your photography a kind of kindness or a gentle touch that also for me is quite recognizable in anything Japanese, in anything they do. There's a respect for the rhythm of things, I feel. Even the food, you can feel the process to make it is as important as the way you serve the food, and as important as the way you eat the food. Like everything, there's a lot of respect for the process. And in Western life, especially in recent times, we respect less and less that. We want immediate satisfaction all the time out of everything. So I guess, do you think that's also related with your own Switzerland way of view things? That gentle touch?
Maybe, yes. I think um, learning about another culture, especially the Japanese culture, is so enriching. I mean, it's the best thing I ever did was to go and learn another language, and then that opens up the whole culture, you know, and it's just, it enriches your life so much.
And humbles you.
Oh, yeah, because you see things from a totally different perspective, you know?
And you need to learn. So you need to be actively engaged all the time, knowing that you are not in a protagonic position, because you need to be there learning as much as you can to participate later, right?
Yeah.
So but yes, there is a quality in the lighting you use that for me, when I listen to you talking, I feel it's really genuine. It's very connected, because there's some gentleness in you.
Thank you.
That it is also present in your photography. Is it conscious? Is a conscious decision, or do you think it's more like just like it is?
It's just me, you know. There's a word in Japanese, ochitsuita, which means to be calm and to be sort of
present,
stable and kind of just settled, you know. And I've always been like that, so that's just me, you know. And I think that's another reason why I feel so good in Japan. It's like another home for me, because I'm not aggressive. I'm not necessarily a very dominant person at work, you know. So if I'm in a situation on a shoot, I let the other person lead often. If they want me to lead, I will, you know. But I think it's all about respecting other people, you know, and treating people with respect and kindness. And so I think that's just a mix of who I've become just by virtue of living all these years, and what I've been exposed to in my travels, including in Japan, where I lived for a year and a half. So
during the degree, right?
Yeah.
Was part of the degree to go to Japan and live in there?
Yeah.
Did you start? You were doing all the kind of works. Actually, you were doing something with theater, and it was something you loved, kabuki theater, but you didn't took any photos during that time.
That's true.
What was
Gosh,
that?
you've really done your research. Yeah. No, at that time, okay, so kabuki theater is an ancient art form.
Thank you for bringing the...
You know, it's just so, it's a huge universe and in itself. And I was hired to be a translator, or interpreter rather, at the Kabuki Theater of Japan. So I was there translating the scripts and then writing commentaries and recording them, so that English-speaking tourists who came to watch Kabuki would listen to me explaining simultaneously whilst watching the play.
Wow.
You know, so that was my job. And at that time I was still a student.
Also.
Yeah, it was huge, and it was the school of life. I mean, it was amazing to have unlimited access to rehearsals and performances for a whole year, and to be able to go in and out of the Kabuki Theater for free, you know. So I stayed for entire days watching, because performances last entire days. Yeah, it's like opera.
It's like opera, okay.
Yeah. But it's more than opera, you know, which is why it's so hard for people to understand what kabuki is, you know, because it's a combination of singing, acting, dancing, you know, mime, acrobatics. There's so much, and the literature side of it is incredible. You know, they have one of their writers was known as the Shakespeare of Japan, who originally wrote for the Bunraku Puppet Theater, and then his plays were adapted to kabuki. He's called Chikamatsu Monzaemon. In the 17th century, he was writing plays that rivaled Shakespeare, you know. So it's a huge thing. And for me, I was just absorbing as much as I could as an interpreter. Of course, I wanted to take pictures, but I wasn't an established photographer yet. And I think they need to get to know you a little bit first before they can let you do things like go backstage and take pictures. So I just I focused on my work as an interpreter, and I took photos elsewhere.
And with your eyes, I guess you were making pictures all the time, because I guess the things you were able to see were unforgettable.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so you also started to working as a photographer in Japan, and one of the things that I remember you said, and I like it, was that you had to take photos of models and you didn't have time to engage too much because it needed to be done quite quickly.
Yeah.
And somehow you discover that you have this ability to look at a person, and it doesn't take you too much to
Right.
see what you like about that person in
Yeah.
terms of in the face or the personality, I guess.
Mm.
So do you still feel like you apply that quality when you have to work under pressure?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's because I like people. I'm curious about people, and I like people genuinely. Which is actually great professionally, because I'm interested in people, but it means I could also fall in love very quickly.
I know.
So and I get my heart broken very quickly. But it's
I can relate
I
to
like
that.
people. So for me, if I look at someone, I immediately find something that I like. Not just physically. It could just be
A quality,
a
yeah.
quality. And so that's the entry point into the portrait. When you decide what you like about someone, that's how you enter the portrait situation, by focusing on that first, and then you discover more things, and then you try other things. But so I think that if you have that instinct, you need to tap into that when you're in situations where you don't have much time with the subject. So you go into a shoot, you have maybe 10-20 minutes, and you need to have a point of view. So that's your point of view to start, is like, what do I like about this person? What do I want to show?
And being able to, because sometimes the more important part is in that process of making that observation a fact, which is the photograph.
Yeah.
And you have been doing that successfully. I would like to talk, of course, of all the amazing people you have had the opportunity to photograph, but I would like to first know, when you were in Japan already doing this kind of job, and at the same time you finished your degree in Japanese, somehow I think you already knew that you were going to be a photographer, maybe not a Japanese translator,
Right.
or that degree, but were you able at that moment to know that knowledge of the culture and the language was going to help your photography work?
Mm-hmm.
Were
No, I
you
didn't.
able to do this connection? Why did you keep going on with your degree?
Because I loved every minute of it. I mean, I tried never to miss a day of classes. I'm a bit of a nerd, and I would go to bed reading the Japanese dictionary for years. That's how I studied. But for me, no, I mean, I did it for me. I wanted to learn
pleasure.
Japanese for me. It was very self-indulgent. It's like, a lot of people questioned it. They said, "Why don't you learn Mandarin instead? It's going to be much more useful to you
at that time."
in work."
You had that question.
A lot of people said that to me at that time, and I said, "No, I want to learn Japanese because that's what I'm interested in right now." And I wasn't thinking ahead, like, what am I going to do with it? I didn't know at that point that I was going to become a photographer, or I didn't know what I was going to do with the Japanese. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And then halfway through my degree, I discovered photography, and then I was able to do both at the same time. And actually, it was interesting because I discovered photography, obviously photographing my mother, but then my father stopped paying for my studies halfway through my degree. It was part of the drama of the divorce. He decided he didn't want to support me. And I decided, okay, that's totally fine. I'm not going to ask him. I'm not going to force him to pay anything. I'm just going to become independent at this stage.
Wow.
I was 20 and I thought it's about time that
You didn't panic?
Start.
A little?
No, I knew that it was going to be a rough few years, and it was actually. It was a very tough time. But I thought out of every hardship, you can turn it into something positive.
Yes.
That's what I always try to do. Of course, it's not always that easy, but if something bad happens, try and make it good.
I totally agree, yeah.
And so I tried to look at how can I make this sudden change in my circumstances an opportunity. And I thought, well, maybe I can start doing photo shoots professionally in my own capacity, so as a student, photographing fellow students who need headshots, because at Oxford there's a lot of people who want to become actors or whatever. There's a lot of very ambitious people there, and elsewhere, so whoever I met, I let them know that I was available to do photo shoots, and I think I charged about £50 for a photo shoot, including the prints, because I did them myself, so it was cheap, and that's how I put myself through the last few years of my degree, is by doing this. And so by the time I graduated Oxford, I had a portfolio, and I knew anyway that that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, because I've had this moment of, falling in love with photography when I photographed my mom, but then it became sort of also a way to support myself, and that's important to remember, is that photographers are not necessarily just creatives. We're also, it's more of a commercial type of creativity, because
there's a need in the market
applied.
For photographers, all the time.
Yes.
Even now that everyone feels like they are photographers, but still there's a huge need in the market. But you have always been doing your commissions and at the same time developing your own personal projects, like that kosher face. Is the title of the project? And was at the end, after so many years photographing Orthodox Jewish, you did a great exhibition in East London.
Thank you. Yes.
I love those photos. Photos. Maybe it's also because I love the aesthetic of everything you were photographing there, especially the men, the hats. There's something hugely elegant and attractive about that. It's mysterious. It's not accessible for everyone. There's not access, so maybe that makes things even more attractive. But you, at the moment you were working on that project, how were you relating to that? You wanted to do an exhibition, or you were just doing what you needed for your heart to feel, to be, to feel you were still alive after all?
No, I mean, I wasn't thinking about any exhibitions or anything. I was still a student finishing my degree, but the fact is that in my final year at university, I rented a room in the house of an Orthodox Jewish rabbi and his family, so it could have been a real terrible experience, but it turned out to be an amazing experience, because they treated me with respect. And they completely went against any preconceptions I had about that community.
Were you defining yourself as an atheist at that point?
No.
At that moment?
No. But I have a passion for photography at that point, and they knew it. And so I set up a little studio in the house, and anyone who came in and who was up for being photographed came into this little corner that I had set up and had their portrait taken. And so after a year of that, I had quite a fun series of pictures, which for me, you say you love it, but I think that's because I loved it and I love doing it, and I think that comes across in the photos.
Definitely.
Because it was a personal project that I did from my heart, So Judaism is I'm Jewish. I'm actually not religious at all, and I've never really been, but I've always loved my heritage. My mother is Jewish, and so there's so much beauty there, and even though I don't agree with all of it, I still find it fascinating.
And probably some sort of attachment.
Yes.
Even if it's not rational, sometimes it's the best one.
Yeah, absolutely.
The way that life manifests itself mysteriously. And I cannot I mean, I can't avoid the fact that I want to know everything about that viral, super amazing photo you did with Vivian Westwood. And I want to say her husband.
Yes, don't forget the husband.
Yeah, his name is Andrea, but I think
Yes.
it's fair with all the historical, I don't know, all the times in history that women have been called the wife of, to say the husband of.
Yes.
So that photo in green, when they both look something green, like olive green, and it's such an iconic photo that I cannot believe that it was actually taken in 2016 or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's not that much long ago,
Right.
but I feel it's been there forever.
Yes.
Tell me please the story of that photo.
Thank you. Well, I love that you just said that because I try to achieve timelessness.
Yeah.
That's such a pretentious thing to say, but I think every photographer tries to take pictures that are timeless, at least in portraiture, because then, if you look at those pictures years down the line, it still looks fresh,
Yes,
and you
it
feel like
does.
it's been there. You feel like it really does represent that person.
And even if it's a particular moment in time,
Mm.
it really, I'm sure it could be the 60s, the 70s, it's going to be any time. Is the connection between them in that beautiful portrait, it's there. It is something about them aesthetically, what they mean for the industry is
Yeah.
there, but also something between them.
And that's the thing is that, when you take portraits, I think you should always try and keep it simple and take out all the distractions. Take out anything that's going to date the picture, that's going to make it look like from a certain era. Try and really just strip it of everything that's going to distract so that it's really just about the person. And usually that involves just very simple light, simple, beautiful, clean colors, clean lines, and just letting that person feel the moment instead of trying to entertain them or making them smile or anything like that.
You don't need too many effects, like special
Exactly.
effects. At the end, you have that amazing person in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for them, it was they needed a picture of them together because she's bringing him sort of more to the front of the brand, and he's taking on more responsibilities at Vivian Westwood, and so they wanted a portrait introducing him.
Yeah, let
really.
people know that he was there as well. Yeah. And you did a whole photo shooting with many different the styling of those photos. Some of them are both of them in the same dress, and some of them both in masculine suits, and all the looks are amazing. But who was working with you as a stylist?
So there was no stylist. It was just them.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, they were styling themselves.
Wow, great.
Yeah, so there was someone there steaming the clothes, but actually they knew what they were doing. I mean, they are so innately stylish that they don't really need anyone to...
Exactly.
And they just came into the studio with racks of clothes and they just sort of listened to the music. She wanted to have classical music on, which actually surprised me. I thought she was going to have something different, but she wanted classical music, and they just kind of looked around the rack and said, okay, well, let's try this. And it came very organically. Nothing was too planned. But you see, because they are so connected to their
what they do
aesthetic, that it just fell into place beautifully, and every look was better than the next. It was just like, wow.
Do you think that's your more famous photo, or the one that has gone more viral, or not necessarily?
It depends, because actually I took pictures before the age of Instagram that would have gone more viral had there been social media,
Yeah.
But so for example, the Vogue editors, I took a group portrait of all the Vogue editors from all the international editions of Vogue, and I think that was before Instagram. Actually, it was just like a year or two before Instagram.
Yeah, I wanted to. There are so many things I want to ask you. This is
going
to be.
I'm here. But that picture actually went around the world in minutes, and it was viral. That was my first experience of a viral
The one
photo.
with all the Vogue editors around the world.
Yes.
All of them were there.
Yes.
This photo with many women with Anne Winter in the center.
Yeah.
And Franca Sozzani, which is for me even more amazing than Anne.
A legend, I know.
Yeah, I love her. I totally love her. And when I saw the behind the scenes, she was very elegant, not trying to capture any attention, but she's just very bohemian and but very lovely. And yes, that was to offer some sort of support after the tsunami in Japan. And how did they find you? Why you did that photo? I know you are now well known as a specialist in portrait groups, group portraits. But at that time, was it something new for you? Tell me about that.
I mean, I've been doing it since the beginning, because even at Oxford, I did my first group portraits there.
Okay.
And actually, I think that it's because of what I did at Oxford, where at the time, I didn't know Photoshop. I was shooting in analog. I didn't know how to Photoshop anything. So my first group portrait was of my friends at Oxford, and so I picked about 10 different people. And because they're my friends, they put up with me and they allowed me to just, faff around for an entire day. And they posed for me for an entire day. And I made sure every detail was perfect before I took the picture.
With natural light?
No, with studio lights. I set up studio lights. And I use them as guinea pigs, really, to experiment with, the composition and everything, to make sure it was all perfect, so that by the time I shot it, there was no need for any Photoshop.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because I naively believed that the group shots of
are like that, are made like that.
We're all made like that. So I read Vanity Fair in my teens. And I believe that that's how they did it, that it was all shot in one go with no Photoshop. So I decided I was going to learn how to do that myself. And that's from the beginning, I just did it without Photoshop. And so for Vogue, I guess that they'd seen some of my group shots somewhere. And they contacted me saying, we need a group shot that doesn't need any Photoshop, because there's a deadline immediately after the photo shoot. I think I had like 20 minutes to shoot it, and then 30 minutes after the photo shoot, the picture had to be sent to get images.
Imagine also the logistics to have all these women, all the directors of all Vogues around the world, Vogue magazine around in one place at the same time.
It was the first time that they were all in the same place at the same time, and so Condé Nast really wanted to make a memento of this moment. And it was the first time that this was happening ever, for Vogue editors to be together and to be photographed together. So they really wanted to take a group shot, and they needed it to be done correctly without the need to comp different images together. Because Getty Images needed to get the picture out around the world before the Friday night deadline to make it for the newspaper editions, the weekend editions of the newspapers. So basically they said, can you do it in camera? You'll only have about half an hour after the shoot before it is going to go around the world. And I guess I was crazy enough to say yes. Because it could have gone horribly wrong. It could be a double-edged sword. You could just easily take a really bad picture, and then that's what's going to be seen. So you really need to make sure you get it right. And so there's a lot of pressure there. Also, the additional layer that it's Anna Wintour, Franca Sozzani, all these incredible people who you look up to.
Was that very intimidating?
No, because I grew up around women who are like that. So for me, I like that. I like being in that environment. I love fabulous women. I love strong women. For me, that's, my grandmother was like that. My mom is like that. So, and I absorb their energy, and I also don't try and dominate them. So I think that you just need to humble yourself and do your work, and just focus on trying to do your job as the photographer. It's not about you as the photographer, it's about them. So put everything in place before the shoot so that everything is as ready as possible for it to go smoothly. So I got there 12 hours before, and I set it all up, and I practiced, and I got photography students to come in and sit for about 3 hours, and I practiced the whole process on them, so that by the time the editors arrived, it was all they needed to do was just sit in a spot and shine,
relax
and relax,
exactly.
you know. And so then by that point I didn't need to think of all the technical stuff because I had already rehearsed it, and I just was able to focus on them and talking to
and
them.
the situation in itself.
Yeah.
Are you good at managing frustration when you do so much previous work and things don't go the way you want them to go?
I'm a very calm person, you know. I handle crises quite well. I'm good in under pressure. Like, that's just me, you know. And so that helps a lot. Yeah, but also you just need to be confident in your abilities.
Because I also think Anne Winter wanted to see that photo before it went,
Yes.
and that wasn't planned.
That wasn't planned. So after the shoot,
and
I
you
went.
know, she could have been an obstacle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, those are the rebondissements, as we say. Those are the kind of sudden twists in the plot that happen on a day like that, which make it even more amazing and exciting. You know, so I was
Now.
I was sitting in the hotel room. You know, I barely had the chance to look through everything. You know, and I just had time to pick the one photo, and I adjusted the colors a little bit. I adjusted the lightness, the brightness of the picture, and I only had time to Photoshop the seams in the background, you know, because it was several different pieces of sheets of backdrops next to each other, and there was kind of like you know, so I just had time to erase that. That was all I had time to do, and suddenly there was a knock on the door, and it was the PR who was saying, "Oh, Anna Winter wants to see the picture before anything happens." And so I was like, okay, so this is going to get it really interesting now. So I took a deep breath and I said, okay, I'm going to just bring my laptop downstairs and, you know.
And pray.
And yeah. And so I was in the lobby of the Grand Hyatt in Tokyo, and you know, the PR was getting very nervous because this was not planned, and if she didn't like the picture, if she didn't like the picture, then she could just cancel the whole thing, you know, and then all those months of preparation and all the time and effort that had been invested would have been for nothing, you know. So a lot was riding on that one moment, and so I just put my laptop down and I said, well, my work, it's out of my hands now. I've done what I can. You know, and so then she came and had a look, and she said, "Very good." And
well done, congratulations.
She didn't quite say congratulations, but she said she had a look, and she was silent for a few seconds, and then she looked at me and she said, "Very good," and then she walked off, and then actually Franca also came to have a look because I think she told her. So then Franca arrives, and so elegant, like an angel, you know, with the blonde hair and the black lace. She was just so gorgeous, and I was actually a bit starstruck by Franca, you know. So she was looking and smiling, and I was just kind of looking into her eyes and smiling back at her, and yeah, it was a bit of an awkward moment.
You declaring your love, and she was interested in the photo. Let's see. Let's see how good I look.
But so she was also fine with it, and then it was fascinating because that was 2011, so there wasn't really all that social media stuff happening at that time. So it was still all about the newspapers and the newspaper websites, and so then we sent the picture to Getty Images and had a drink finally, you know, to relax a little bit, and literally within 5 minutes it was around the world, everywhere. And that's when suddenly you started getting phone calls and people congratulating you, and I said, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Did that photo specifically open other opportunities for you, or was just part of a process that was going to happen, and obviously part of your destiny? I see it that way, but something came after that specifically because of that?
You know, I'm not sure it did, to be honest, because I think with photography, you have many little breaks, many little breaks, and those kind of add up over time to create your body of work and to create your reputation. But I don't know if those big moments necessarily mean as much as you think they do. So people had already seen my work.
Always says things like that. It is incredible.
Yeah, and actually the thing about me is that at that time especially I was very shy, so I already had Facebook, but I didn't even post the picture. I didn't post it because I thought it would be too pretentious, and I didn't want to show off about it, so I didn't post it. And I thought, well,
I see that in the way you communicate, because you have an Instagram, and then you, for example, obviously avoid too many details just to not sound too pretentious. But I saw a photo that I thought it was amazing, and then I realized, researching it, that it was for China Harper Bazaar. The first thing I would have done is to put in that tag. This photo was made for, because of course you want you. It's so easy to feel proud about something like that,
right.
And you don't say anything.
Well, I wasn't brought up like that. Actually, I was brought up to not talk about myself at all, if I'm honest. And so for me, social media is a little bit uncomfortable because that's not who I am. I'm not the kind of person who wants to, shout, oh, this is what I've done. And, I have to.
And I also see that you
but
always reply very kindly to everyone.
I try, because if they take the effort to write something, then I want to reply. But I think that it's nice that to just I focus on my work, and I'm focusing on my next project. I don't want to just lie on my laurels of stuff that I've done before, and I want to look forward to the future. And so for me, that's more important than just showing off on social media.
And somehow now new generations are very aware about representation in photography. And I love the fact that they are very activists, all of them, trying to create spaces to show different kind of bodies, different kind of beauties, different kind of realities. But you have done that, you have been doing that since a long time, because when you started working with Japanese, for example, beauties and models, it was for someone that wanted to introduce in the local market more Japanese models. How do you relate with that? Do you feel a responsibility in that sense, the sense of helping representation?
Yeah, I think representation is extremely important. And I've had many arguments about this with people who disagree. But I personally really believe
Why would you disagree?
Because some people say that representation is a superficial thing. They say, oh, it's tokenism, to just put in different people together just for the sake of it. But the fact is that if you are a young kid growing up somewhere and you see someone who looks like you represented on a magazine cover or in a photo shoot, looking great, looking accomplished,
being appreciated,
then it makes you want to do that too, and it gives you more sort of.
Or maybe you don't have to necessarily want that, but at least you feel that that thing you represent has been represented as
exactly.
well. So you belong. You are part of something. You are not fighting against who knows. I don't know. I feel it's unconsciously both. It's really important because also it creates your sense of aesthetic, your what do you think is beautiful or not, and all those things at the end of the day they matters a lot.
They do, absolutely. But then I think that as a photographer, you should be doing this without even thinking about it. Diversity shouldn't even be something that you set out to do consciously. Like, you should just be diverse anyway in your life. I mean, you should have friends from all over. You shouldn't just be friends with people who look like you or who have the same
speaks like you.
Exactly. So and I think that's the best thing that I got from being in international school, was that people were from all over the world. And so I was exposed to that from a very early age. And for me, that's what I've been used to all my life. And then, to be honest with you, when I came to the UK and I went to Oxford, I was shocked because I realized for the first time in my life that diversity is not something that exists everywhere. I found that there was a lack of diversity at Oxford, you know, and I think things have improved since then. But 20 years ago, when I was at Oxford, it was not diverse. And so I, for the first time, realized looking around, oh, you know, what I had in Switzerland growing up was not necessarily the norm. And so then, anyway, now I'm no longer at Oxford, you know, I'm free to, you know, meet people from all walks of life, and I do that, and that is reflected in what I do, of course, because if I'm gonna have control over the casting of my shoots, which I don't necessarily always do, but if I do have control over the casting, then I will bring people that I like, that I want to photograph, and they can be from all walks of life, you know. But then it's interesting when you don't have control over the casting of your shoots. And because I do groups, that's where suddenly patterns emerge. So a few years ago, I was asked by British Vogue to do a group portrait of the staff, of the entire staff at British Vogue. This is for Alexandra Schulman's team before she retired.
I saw the behind the scene of that shoot. And it brought problems because everyone had the opportunity to realize that there's not much diversity there.
Right, absolutely. It was before the new chapter that we currently have, you know, and it was the first time that there had been a group shot of her team all together, and I think that's when people realized, oh my gosh, there is certainly an issue here, you know, and so for that reason it became really interesting to show that. I didn't have to say anything. I was hired to take a portrait. I didn't know who was going to be there before. To be honest, I thought it was going to be diverse, you know, because there were 60 people in that picture.
And also, this is Britain.
Yes, I mean, this is London.
Exactly,
you know.
This is London.
So,
and it's Vogue. It's an international concept with plurality. Should be like that, with a vision of a universal vision, a vision open and avant-garde somehow also. Yes, that's really, but that's great that you did that work. You feel somehow that
I love it. I think that's where I can be really useful, and so for me this was a very important picture, even though it was a lot of people saw it and rightfully were outraged, and it went around the world. It went viral as well because of that, you know, because Naomi Campbell posted it on Instagram and saying that, you know, there is a problem of diversity at Vogue, you know, and obviously that has nothing to do with me, you know, I'm the photographer. I don't have anything to do with Vogue's hiring practices, you know. But I was able to
do that photo,
to take that picture, you know, and it revealed something. So, what more can I ask for?
Do you miss the days of analog photography? What do you think those days gave you as a photographer that you would not have if that wouldn't have happened like that? I mean, being in moments when you needed to, with a millimeter, is it the name?
A light meter.
A light meter to taste the light.
Yes.
And you know, doing your revealing, we say in Spanish and Italian, developing your own prints. I feel like it gives you a sense of, as a creator, of more control or more artistic approach to photography. Maybe,
right?
I don't know.
So it's the best way to learn is to learn analog, because you will learn how light works without you'll know that you expose the picture correctly without even seeing it. Now it's too easy because you look at your screen and you're like, okay, that's too light, too dark, but you don't necessarily understand why, and you don't necessarily understand how to fix it. But the thing is, when you're measuring light and you're shooting film, you don't see, but you know that what you're doing is still right. And so that gives you confidence and it gives you a stronger foundation. At least in my case, I feel like it gave me a very strong foundation technically, because I really got to grips with how it all works at the beginning, you know, and I'm self-taught, so I had to kind of just figure it out. No one was explaining things to me. But then at the same time, I think that shooting on film, it helped to focus on what you were trying to say and focusing on the subject, because you're not distracting yourself by looking at your screen constantly. You're actually looking at the person. And
I love that.
you're
Yes.
actually looking through the viewfinder and you're looking at what you're seeing. A lot of people look without seeing, but you're looking and you're seeing what's really there. So, and you're visualizing how it's going to look.
I love
as a
that. I never
photo.
thought about that, but that's definitely the beauty of those times, that you were hoping that that photo, well, talking for myself, when you had a camera and you didn't know what was there until you had the opportunity to develop that film. So somehow you weren't really so engaged with the photographing itself. You were more looking at the beautiful thing you wanted to photograph. That's totally true. Yeah.
You're more focused on
the reality, on the moment.
And on the details. You know, you're looking at actual details.
But also you went from analog black and white to analog in colors.
Yeah.
And you started developing in colors, which is, I don't think I know anyone that done
that. So
apart from you.
That was so great as well, because you understand how color works, and you understand that because if you're processing in color, you understand you need to figure out how it works in order to make the colors more to your taste, and it's all about taste at the end of the day, you know. And so that's where you decide really what your aesthetic is when you're experimenting with color. So you can actually remove and add colors within other colors, you know, which people don't necessarily realize, is that, you know, maybe there's too much magenta in the reds, maybe there's too much yellow in the reds, maybe you could add a bit more blue to the black colors, maybe you can make the blues a little more blue. You know, so you can actually change the colors within different colors, because they're all
like
mixtures
painting.
Anyway.
Sounds like when people is preparing their palettes to paint, that depending how do they do those mixes, the chroma effect changes completely. The effect of the color, the brightness of the color. There's blue, but there are so many kind of blue.
Yes, and that's when you realize the power of every color. You actually, if you think about how the colors work and you can adjust them and you learn how to adjust them,
was it expensive?
You unleash more power of each. You unleash more from each color. You exploit more of their potential individually, and that makes so much more of an impact. You see this Vivienne Westwood picture with this green. You talk about this green, but for me that is so important. That specific shade of green was so precise for me, and so sorry, I forgot your other question.
So you probably feel that you feel that you have a special connection or relationship or understanding of colors. You feel proud of that.
Yeah, I
love
color.
Do you think that comes from that analog times?
Absolutely.
When you had to?
Because you had to select your film depending on the color sort of balance that it had. So some films they're all totally different. You know, some films had more vivid colors for portraits, or some films had more sort of soft colors for portraits. You have to decide what you like, and so that forms your aesthetic at the end of the day.
I asked if it was too expensive.
Oh, it was expensive, but because I was processing it myself, it was much cheaper that way. And also, you find ways of procuring the film cheaper. So, you know, I would order it from abroad. I remember at the time I was buying it in bulk from Holland, and it was just sent, like, you'd buy 100 rolls of film in one go, and it was much cheaper that way.
And you also mentioned before that it was also dangerous.
Yes, because the color, all the chemicals in the color darkroom were just so bad for you, you know. So it was a lot of chemicals to deal with, and I was in there for like hours and hours breathing all that stuff in.
Oh God. I don't want to know what that did to your health.
No, it's okay.
Well, you look good.
I'm still here. So,
Yes, you
yeah.
feel good. You feel good. You feel
Yeah,
good.
I feel all right.
And coming back to iconic images or photographs. That one you did with Ian at home that was included in the Royal Photographic Society International Exhibition.
Amazing. You're so good.
It's such an iconic photo as well. I
Thank
mean, I
you.
know you have photographed Ian McKellen
Yes.
in few opportunities.
Mhm.
Actually, my favorite is that one channeling this actor.
Ivor Novello.
Ivor Novello,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yes.
That's beautiful. The lighting of that picture
Thank
seems
you.
like a master painting.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful. But this one is also great because you can actually feel and have a perception of real life,
Yeah.
which in these days is so easy to delete from a photo.
Yes,
the feeling
because
of reality.
because I left a lot of details in that normally people would expect me to Photoshop. So
Mhm.
yes, I made a conscious decision to just leave in the socket on the wall, leave in the radiator with
There's something in the radiator.
There was like
yeah.
scissors and a roll of tape, and then leave all the clamps visible, holding up the fabric. Because for me, and also leave everything around, like the walls, the floor. A lot of people were saying to me, why didn't you just crop it so that it was just the fabric surrounding him? But actually for me, it's much more important to let the reality creep in because it's so heightened. That setup is so dramatic and heightened that I think you need something you need reality to creep in. You need the high and the low, the contrast of reality and that real fiction, And also, it's interesting because Ian actually thinks I should rename it Camp.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
I heard that.
And I love that.
Wow, I love it.
I think I will because I think
are you gonna do it?
He's absolutely right, and I love that he has that perspective on it because after all, it was a collaboration. So why not, let him say what he wants it to be called? Because actually, he's completely correct. It is really just camp.
Yes.
And as he said, it's
And also, he was explaining how he relates to that adjective, that term,
yeah.
that word, in a way that for him feels good. Because at his time when he was young, you didn't call yourself queer because it was like not good. That was the name that all the people that didn't like you were calling you.
Yeah.
So it was lovely the way he related with the word in itself.
It's a fascinating word, and to be honest, it's a really hard word to understand.
It's a really difficult concept.
In fact, when I tried to explain it in French to my mum, there's no real word in French to translate it directly, camp. You could say maniéré, but maniéré means mannered.
Or you could say quiche, but it's not the same.
It's not the same.
But for me, it's this closest, but it's still not the same.
But it's not necessarily gay either. Camp can be, anyone can be camp, and that's why Susan Sontag, when she wrote Notes on Camp, she had a real hard time defining camp, and she gave up after a few pages because she just couldn't really do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the essay is just kind of is like numbered points, basically, of different examples of what camp can be. It's like an Art Deco. The entrance to a subway in Paris, those Art Deco entrances, those are camp because it's one thing, but then it's also something else when it's, it's long stems of roses, so you can actually, or when like an Art Deco lamp is adorned with very elaborate leaf motifs, then it becomes something more than what it is, and that's camp.
Yes, it's somehow, I think Susan sometimes used to relate to the term like that. Is that like a celebration of a side of the personality in it?
Yes.
And it's a celebration of this maybe not so tasteful decision or no so balance, or definitely not, there's not so this need of simplicity or neutrality. Is all the opposite. It's
Yes,
always...
it could be something that's taken so over the top that it becomes something more than what it originally
exactly.
And I think in this picture, that's what happened. Even though we didn't set out to do anything camp, well, we're two gay men, so the likeliness of something camp coming out of this is quite high.
Oh yeah.
You know, and that's what happened. I mean, we have fabric, I hang it up, and he just started wearing it, and so obviously it just became something more than what it originally was supposed to be. And for me, that was such a special moment, because I went to that shoot at his house by myself. I brought tons of stuff. You know, I had so many different ideas, and I presented them to him on the day. He's like, okay, so what are we doing? And I said, okay, so I've got the suitcase full of knitwear that I unknitted. You know, I kind of undid it gradually over like several weeks whilst I was watching TV. I was unknitting these sweaters, you know, and I thought it'd be nice to have distressed knitwear that looks kind of like derelict, you know. So that was one idea. Then I had all these fabrics that I thought, oh, you know, it'd be great to have them billowing around him in the wind, you know. But originally that idea was to do on the terrace outside. And instead he said, well, why don't you just try it in here?
And also you mentioned that the idea behind that image of Ian was an anecdote that he told you about his childhood.
Yes. Yes.
So that's also beautiful. That for you, the image brings that thing.
Absolutely, because so many times he told the story of how when he was, I think, 9 years old, he went to watch Peter Pan, a pantomime, for the first time, and after the pantomime, he went and looked behind the curtain. And then he was fascinated by everything he saw behind the scenes, you know, so he saw the cables hanging around, he saw the equipment, he saw the world of how it all works, you know. And so for him, there was a real fascination between that contrast of all the make-believe on stage and then
the reality.
And then the reality. And so this is what that picture was originally about for me, was, you know, leaving the reality, but also you've got the make-believe from the actor, you know, with the fabric, but then you have what's behind the scenes, behind the curtain.
Yeah, beautiful.
Creeping in.
There's a quote by Diane Arbus that says something like, a photograph is a secret of a secret, or it's a secret on a secret that the more you see, the less you know. It's something like that, and it's a quote that I really like, and I have always seen one of the reasons why sometimes video for me doesn't have the same magic as photography does, is that because it's this moment on time in mute, it's just this moment, just this reality, not more than that, not less either. Feels like you can't tell any story really. You can relate in so many ways, especially these amazing photographs that are very iconic and maybe makes you to relate to an aesthetic that is no longer part of our lives. Is it there any quote that you love? I'm sorry if I took you
no, I mean, off the top of my head,
I was just thinking about that.
I love that quote. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't really think of a quote right now, but I think that, yes, it's true that actually when a photograph is truly iconic, you know, the more you look at it, the less you know in a way, because more questions keep coming up.
Exactly.
And that's definitely the case for, you know, if I look at the old pictures of Cartier-Bresson, Henri Cartier-Bresson, who was he was more of a reportage photographer, but he took amazing portraits. I thought about photos like that, yeah. And you just look at those pictures taken around France or all over Europe, and it's just fascinating, really. Like, you want to know so much, you know, and because photography doesn't give you all the answers, it's so much more compelling, you know, to fill in the gaps with your own imagination. you know, and that's the power of photography. You know, we don't have what video has with the sound and the movement. So you've really got to be able to express everything in one picture.
Exactly.
Which for me is why it's so much more interesting being a photographer, because it's the ultimate challenge to do it all in one shot.
Yeah, exactly. And in your group photographs, you can see, especially in those ones that were not necessarily a group of people that used to do the same activity, or ladies, men, you have done that in many beautiful ways and many opportunities for Vanity Fair, for different international magazines. But there's one in particular that you mentioned that was inspired in Jericho's painting, with this guy
in a pink jacket.
And in the middle. And then I went to see the paintings to see if I could notice any connection, and definitely I saw, oh wow, this is a great way to think about these images that are old paintings and bring them back. But the lighting in many of those group photos is just so Caravaggio like. It's a very beautiful dark but light, but then the colors really stand out. How do you achieve that? Is it possible to talk about the technical aspects of that?
It's very simple. Just one light in that picture. There was just one light, a good light, but it's just very simple.
Just one on?
Yeah, one big light.
Okay.
That's all. Thing is that you don't need to complicate things with too much, you know. And I think this is because I'm self-taught. At the beginning, I didn't know how to do everything else, so I just used one light or two maybe. Never more than two in the beginning. And so I think that that's just become my style now. Even though I've investigated all the other techniques and special effects, it's not for me, you know. And so keep it simple always, and you don't need more than two lights for anything. So that's how it was lit. And then obviously there's ways you can position the people and the entire scene. Originally that scene was supposed to be shot full on against a wall, so it would just have been flat against a wall. But then suddenly I thought this would look better if we just tilt it slightly at a 45-degree angle, and if I tilted my own point of view so that it's more of a diagonal line across the room, and that his line of vision looks out of the picture in the other direction, because then there's so much more drama and dynamic lines going on everywhere, rather than it just being flat against just a scene, you know. So it's also your instinct to try and look at it from a different point of view, because originally I hadn't planned to shoot it that way, but on the day I just took a chance and I said, let's just try it from a different angle, move everyone at a different angle, and then that was what made that picture, I think, because then suddenly the colorful clothes were against a darker side of the room, which made them pop more, you know. And I think that that's all you need, is to have the right angle, the right point of view, use the right lens.
And maybe all you need is good observation and try different options, not get stuck in just one idea. Being flexible, I think, is a great thing.
People get bored, you know. If you just shoot for a whole hour in the same position, people are just going to get bored. But then do it, you know, just do it for a few minutes and a few shots, and then move on to something different. Just move everything slightly, and then maybe move a few people around in different positions, you know. That way you're not stuck with choices that you made which don't necessarily work afterwards. So that way you have flexibility, and you realize, oh, okay, thank goodness I moved this person to this side because they look better on this side, you know. It can all change.
Even when you have people wearing beautiful clothes in an editorial for a magazine, when do you think a photo, an image is a portrait of a group, and when it's just a fashion editorial or a fashion shooting. What makes that difference? What needs to be there for you to feel like it's a portrait of people of a group of people?
Well, for me, I'm a portrait photographer, so for me, even a fashion picture is a portrait.
It's a portrait.
That's because I approach everything through the prism of portraiture. So I will look at the person wearing the clothes. I'm not just trying to, if I'm shooting a fashion picture, I'm not just trying to sell the product, which is what a fashion picture is. You're selling a product or a lifestyle. But portraiture, you're not doing that. You're looking at the person. And for me, it's much more interesting to look at the person. So even when I'm shooting fashion, I approach it as a portrait photographer. So if, that's how I'll do it. I'm not going to just focus on trying to sell a dress, because that's not interesting. And so, and also I think because you're approaching it looking at that person, then you're going to respect them and make them
bring them
feel important, make them feel good, and put them in a position that makes them look the best, and that's the portrait.
And belong to the image, be part, not just an excuse to show a piece of clothes, probably. Right. Yeah, and that image you took of Margaret Thatcher, was it difficult? Did you have many restrictions around you? How was that?
No, actually it was remarkably casual and easy. Yeah, that's
amazing.
It was great. She only did about one photo shoot a year around that stage. It was 2007, so it was, I think, 7 or 8 years before she passed. And so at that point, she was battling Alzheimer's, and so her team didn't really want to expose her to too many photo shoot situations. So she did only, I think, one a year. And so that year I did her photo shoot, and it was interesting, because I'm not British originally, so I approached it in a different way than most of my British counterparts would, and for me there's not that amount of I'm not as polarized about her. Obviously I have my opinion about her, but that's not important. If she's a politician, I think I need to just show her the way she is. I think that's what you do with politicians, is you don't necessarily feed into their PR machine by trying to make them look better or worse. I think you should just show them the way that they present themselves to you that day, and not Photoshop them too much, and just try and give people an idea of who they are.
What's the impression you had? What do you think she was?
So I met her as a human being, not as a politician. She was perfectly lovely. We waited for her to come out of her car, and she greeted us with, she was very humble and kind and sweet, and she held onto my arm to go into the studio, and it was like, it reminded me of my grandmother, actually. And we had a lovely conversation. She was very encouraging. She was like, I love how you've set this up, and this light feels great, and she felt good. You could tell she felt good.
That's amazing. Yeah. And the one you did of Tom Ford, what year was that? Was he already the big designer he was?
Yes, he was. That was 2004. He had just left Gucci,
because he's well known for being a perfectionist and someone difficult to work with.
So, how was that? I was very lucky there as well. So I was a student at Oxford at that time, and I was shooting this for an Oxford student publication. And it was at the Oxford Union when he came to make a presentation. And so I set up a little corner in the library. And then all the other photographers were waiting for him outside somewhere, But I had set it up because I was shooting it for a student magazine. And when he came in, he asked me a trick question, actually. He said, so what is this for? And I was embarrassed that I wasn't shooting it for the Times or for the Guardian or whatever, like all the other photographers, And I said, well, it's only for a student magazine, I'm afraid, and I felt like I was maybe not at his level, and that maybe he didn't have time to do something for a student publication. But his response was great because he said, well, actually, that's the only reason why I'm going to do this is because it's not for the Times and it's not for the Guardian, and I don't want to shoot for those newspapers. But because you're doing this as a student for a student publication, then I'll just do it.
Oh God, that's
you know, so
good.
I was like, thank God I said the truth. You know, it's good to always say the truth because actually, for all you know, that might be what gets you a foot in the door.
Thank you for sharing that lesson because I normally like that, but just because I can't help.
Yeah.
But it's good to know that it's actually better than
and then actually it was. And then it was a masterclass in portraiture from him, you know, because he didn't have much time, you know, and he said to me,
this is my angle.
He said to me, this is my angle. I only like the light from this side, you know. So it turns out that I had set it up differently. But so what I did is I said, okay, well, I'll change it for you and I'll start doing it like this, you know. And I didn't say to him that I was gonna move different angles and everything, but I took a few shots the way he wanted it, and then gradually kind of just did it my own way, and then moved the light a little bit, and he was starting to smile because he was like, okay, I know what you're doing.
I know what you're doing.
But it was too late because I was there, you know, and so he kind of went along with it, and it turns out that the picture that I used out of this shoot, I mean, there's so many pictures, but the one that I chose was not the way he normally wanted it, but he loved it. And I know...
You can actually see in that photo that it's not the typical Tom Ford portrait, because one eye looks a little bit smaller, but that gives a sweet touch
but that's reality, because we all have different... Our eyes are never identical. One is always slightly higher than the other.
But maybe he was aware of that.
Yeah.
Trying to avoid that.
He knows what he wants, you know, and then suddenly it changed to something that he didn't necessarily want, but I think that he liked it anyway. And a friend of mine who met with him even 2 years later, I think, had lunch with Tom Ford. And apparently Tom Ford didn't know that we knew each other, showed him this picture that I had taken, and he said, this is my favorite picture of myself.
Wow.
And he showed it to him, and then I heard about it afterwards, you know.
Wow. Have you tried to make contact again?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they used that picture. His team used that picture for years.
Your permission to use it. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's great.
And can you imagine? I was 24.
Congratulations.
I was 24. I was still like, you know, a student, and suddenly my picture is being used by this designer who's well known for being a perfectionist and who has his image is flawless. You know.
Well, let me tell you that what he did with you is what you are doing with me today. So thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. This conversation has been amazing. I wanted to ask about your rules with Photoshop and many other things, but I don't want to steal your time. I know you're busy. And so just one more. Any project?
Yes, I have a few personal projects on the go. So that's what I've been doing during lockdown, is I've been able to really focus on my personal work and go back to it and edit it, and so watch this space.
Yes,
because
it has been a good year for you. You have done all those interviews live in your Instagram, which also shows your quality to interact with people.
Thank you.
And those are really beautiful interviews, all of them. I have been enjoying all of them.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this interview. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I've finally been interviewed by you.
Yeah, in Metralla Rosa studio. Can I kiss you?
Of course. Come here.
Oh, thank you. Thank
My
you
pleasure.
so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure.